Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more home defense testing, and today we've got a shell combo that I've had several requests to try in this sort of application just to see how well they would pattern. They are a very cheap, very basic, budget oriented, just import load. For me, these are probably more of just a cheap range day type of shell, but that doesn't mean that they can't serve us perfectly fine in a home defense style scenario as well. They would certainly be better than a sharp stick unless we see some absolutely terrible results from them, which we have tested these shells previously, and they're okay for what they are, usually anyway. So we'll see how they do in a more home defense style scenario if this is a shell you wanted to or had to run. But first, for the shells we're running today, I brought out some of these Monarch buckshot loads. They're a 12 gauge, 2 3/4 inch, 9 pellet load of double aught at about 1345 feet per second. These Monarchs, I believe, are kind of the brand that Academy sells a lot of the time. They're just your basic cheap import style stuff. There's nothing fancy going on here. We'll look at the shell here in just a second to show you guys as well. I think for a box of 25 of these, I paid $12 or something for this. The price may have gone up a little bit recently, but they're still well below $1 a shell. And I mean, like the box kind of shows, it's got a target on it. That's probably what I would use them for, but they've got enough velocity and stuff behind them, and it is a loaded double aught buck. So if they pattern halfway decent and the pellets go where we want them to go, I don't think a home intruder would want to be standing in front of these, because I don't think they'd have a very good day, but we'll see how they do anyway. But here is one of those shells. You can't really see through the orange hull, but if you look down in there, they're a non-plated, just typical lead buckshot load. No buffer material, no full-length shot cut part of the wad on there, just a little gas seal that sits underneath of them, and that's it. So about as simple and basic as you can get. As for our setup we're running them through, I brought out my Remington 870 special purpose. I've thrown the 18.5 inch barrel back on there. This is your more tactical, much shorter barrel, smooth bore, straight up cylinder choke, so no constriction out of the end at all. Very much your more tactical home defense style shotgun combo right here. So we'll see how they do through a gun with a shorter barrel and no choke at all. So as for our test today, we're running everything the same as we would normally do in one of these home defense style pattern tests. I've got 5 targets lined up down there, so we're going to shoot 5 shots, one at 7, 10, 15, 20, and 25 yards. Obviously, those longer ranges are probably not going to be inside the house, but we want to stretch it out a little and see where our range limitation really starts to show up if you were ever in the 1 in a million scenario where you had to take those longer shots. So we should have a good idea on everything from in the same room as somebody to out across the porch or out into the yard. And of course, I've got the chrono to be getting our velocities as well. So let's get you guys a view of those targets. We'll start taking all of our shots and see how our home intruders actually fare at different ranges. All right, so we'll quickly run through our velocities before we go look at our targets. We have a boss claim of 1345 out of those shells. Obviously, we have an 18.5 inch barrel. I figured we were not going to see that number, and it seems like we were just a little bit over the 1200 mark. We had 1206, 1232, 1221, 1205, and 1239 for an average right at 1220. So 125 feet per second below their boss claim. That's pretty typical from an 18.5 inch barrel, and obviously that's more than enough velocity. These are not a low recoil shell necessarily. They're not as bad as a 3-inch Magnum hunting style buckshot load, but they aren't a dedicated managed recoil shell either, and they cycled perfectly fine in my 870. I've heard of a couple people having problems with the Monarch shells, even in pump guns, being able to cycle and not snag up. I had 0 issues today. But let's head down to our targets and see how our home intruders fared. Alright, so here we are down at our home intruder targets. We'll start up close and personal here with our 7 and 10 yard spreads. The white torso outlines you see are very close to the regulation 18 by 30 inch, about as reasonable as what we could get with just a quick spray paint can, but they are accurate to actual real life size. On the right, with our 7 yard intruder, Obviously, yep, he would not be having a very good day. You've got all 9 pellets right there within a 4.5 inch spread. That's about the size of your fist going right through the center of his chest. And we had one of those little gas seal pieces strike over there as well. And that same trend continues, moving over to the left with our 10-yard intruder. We opened it up just a little bit now to 8 3/4 inches. We start picking up one flyer down there a little bit low, but everything is still well within the chest cavity. So obviously inside in the same room, across the living room, something that would obviously not be a very good time for any two-legged creature standing in front of it. So when it comes down to up close personal shots, these are cheap shells, but they would certainly still do the job. It's just going to come down to whether or not they reliably cycle in your gun, whether or not you trust these to fire every single time. I have never ran across any misfires with the Monarch stuff myself, but they are a cheap import shell. Some people might not hesitate to run these. Other people may not want to bet their life on an import shell like this being 100% reliable. To each their own, but obviously you got the pattern performance to do it, that's for sure. Now we'll step it out a little bit to our 15-yard intruder. Now at 15 yards, we're starting to get to the point where it's either got to be a pretty big house, or maybe, you're out in a barn or a pole shed, or maybe somebody's out in the driveway or something like that. So each case is going to determine whether you should or shouldn't take this shot and our shots at farther distance. But we needed to at least see what our spread was as we stepped it out a little farther. And at 15 yards, we now opened up to 10 1/4 inches. We still have a pretty nice spread of 8 pellets with one little bit of a flyer down there at the bottom right. Still nothing egregious. Even at 15 yards, you're keeping everything within the center of the chest cavity. So we're still looking good there. And we've honestly had other import shells similar to these perform noticeably worse than what this did. It's not a flight control shell for sure, but that would certainly still work. And now we move over to 20 yards. Like I just said, as we get farther out here, it's going to be up to you to determine whether you should or shouldn't take that shot. But now at 20 yards, we've really started to open our spread up pretty quickly. We're now at 23 1/4 inches of overall spread. You've still got a definite 8 of them throughout the chest cavity and into the abdomen down there as well. So it would certainly still work. You had one that might have clipped his chin up there at the top. I still wouldn't want to be standing in front of that combo, but the pattern out at 20 is opening up pretty quick. And surprisingly enough, this might be our worst pattern of the day, is 20 yards. Not by much, but I think it is the most scattered and more open pattern that we've got. Because here we now have 25 yards, and we condensed it back down to a 20-inch spread. We actually have a nice little group of 7 pellets right there in the center of the torso. We've got one flyer over at the right and one flyer up here at the top as well. So 3 1/4 less inches of spread, but you can see once we get out to 20 yards or so, you start to really get those random flyers. Maybe the pattern will be a little more open on one shot, maybe not so much on the other. That's where these cheaper import loads really start to fall apart, is those little bit farther pushes of a shot. You just start to get some random stuff going on with the pellets a little bit, but it's still perfectly capable if for whatever reason you found yourself needing to take a 25-yard shot on some two-legged creature. So overall, it's really not too bad. We've seen worse, that's for sure. I'll walk down the row here and give you guys one last little look at the patterns. There's our 20-yard spread. Now we've got our 15-yard spread over here. Obviously, very bad day. And of course, now down here in the same room inside the house, it's very capable. If it's what I had, I wouldn't hesitate to run it. Myself, I'd probably want a little higher quality shell if I'm trusting my life with it. But for pattern performance, the cheap Monarch stuff through a cylinder bore barrel like that is more than good enough pattern-wise for a home defense scenario, it would seem. And here's one of those little gas seal cushion pieces that sits under the pellets. This is one that actually smacked into the target, so it's a little squished up here at the top, but you can see the little spring cushion area it's got in it and the 3 dimples from the pellets sitting there. Nothing special to see, but it is in the shell, so I figured I'd show it at least, just to have you guys see what is actually loaded in them. All right, y'all. Well, what did you think about this performance right here? Is it flight control type of territory or Hornady Versatite Wad type of territory? No. I mean, with those other higher end shells, you're punching golf balls out here in the same room, and still you're under a baseball at 15 yards with those. But these are significantly cheaper than what those are as well. And you can see still for the average home defense scenario, which is going to be well inside of 15 yards most of the time here, usually 5, 7 yards, maybe 10 if your house is big enough or hallways long enough. That's going to be a very bad time for anybody that tries to stand in front of it. It is certainly better than a sharp stick for sure. These are cheap shells. Would everybody trust them with their life? Maybe, maybe not. If it's what I had to grab, then I'm running it for sure. We've seen way worse out of other cheap import shells that are loaded very similar. So for what they are, the Monarch stuff doesn't seem to be a terrible option. Just like I said previously, I've heard a couple people have some questionable cycling issues with them. So they're cheap enough. If you wanted to leave them in your home defense shotgun, go out to the range and run a number of them through your gun beforehand so you can make sure that they do reliably cycle. They're cheap enough to where that little bit of insurance and knowledge, knowing that they're going to work, is well worth it. So we've got the pattern performance. It's a double-aught buck pellet at over 1,200 feet per second. It's certainly going to do the job and be perfectly effective because we've got patterns that are capable all the way out to 25 yards. But let me know all your thoughts down below. Is this about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you ever tested any of the Monarch double-aught buck loads? And if so, what kind of results have you seen? Is this a shell that you would actually put in your defensive-oriented shotgun and trust your life with and rely on? Or are you kind of like me where you wouldn't hesitate to use it if it's what you had, but you would probably prefer a little bit higher quality shell if your life depended on it? Or is this exactly what you're looking for? Just a cheap option that is pretty reliable and it's got pattern performance to get the job done, that's also affordable enough that you can take out and practice with and run the same load so you know exactly what your setup is going to do. That's definitely a factor as well, but let me know all your thoughts down below, as well as maybe what other shells do you want to see us run through that shorter 870 in one of these defensive style pattern tests. Let me know all that in the comments. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, you have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.